I that is the bats that come out at night from under Congress Bridge. The bridge was built in the 1800s and accidentally became the home of Mexican-tailed bats. I believe that's their name. They're a small species of bats. They leave around the time the sun sets, so like 7:08 Central Time, which is here in Austin, and come back around 7:30. The vice presidential debate happening in about 30 minutes. 30 minutes from now, we're gonna watch Mike Pence and Kamala Harris go on stage on what arguably could be one of the most important vice presidential debates of the history of the United States. Mexican free-tail bats. There you go. Somebody made sure I got it right. Why is this important? I mean, usually, you know, historians aren't bothered by vice presidential debates. Nobody really thinks that the vice presidential debates could be very consequential at all. Constitutionally, the vice president isn't afforded much power besides the assignments of, you know, the president. For example, Mike Pence having taken the control or the oversight of the vaccines and the response to the coronavirus pandemic. But this time, today, this vice presidential debate might be extremely consequential because it could be the last debate. It could be the only debate that we see for the rest of the election season if Donald Trump doesn't recover on time, or if he doesn't recover at all. I mean, you know, he tested positive with coronavirus. He says he feels well, but, you know, there are definitely some concerns by his doctor that he currently might not be doing as well as he says he is. But we're yet to find that out, right? Coronavirus is sporadic. We're just starting to understand it. So there's no predicting exactly what could happen with Donald Trump's sickness, but it's definitely going to be visually striking, this particular vice presidential debate. There's going to be 2 plexiglasses in between the candidates. They're going to be 12 feet apart from each other instead of 7. Donald Trump and Joe Biden were 7 feet apart. Now they're going to be 12 feet apart. And now Mike Pence has the task of really, you know, coming up and defending some of Donald Trump's behaviors and arguments during the most recent presidential debate. I know most of you might have liked Donald Trump's performance. Some of you might have not liked it so much. Most people, at least, can agree that it was very unique this year, in that the president, and look how beautiful it is out here, and that the president was a lot more willing to, you know, be a lot more sporadic, you know, kind of cut corners and not follow the rules of the debate as much. He argued with Chris Wallace. Donald Trump argued with Chris Wallace at some point about the rules of the debate, wanted to have more time to speak. So certainly one of the more interesting debates that we've seen in a while. And with Donald Trump being sick, with this really interesting debate having happened last Wednesday, this vice presidential debate, although the vice president isn't afforded as much power, can be incredibly consequential. Kamala Harris was one of the top interrogators in Congress for a while. Mike Pence has always been a very, you know, pretty strongly footed, you know, well-cemented Christian who has, for the 4 years of Trump's presidency, followed really closely in his footsteps. In 2016, he was one of the biggest and better defenders of Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton, particularly in his debate with the vice president of you know, the vice president in 2016, the vice presidential debate in 2016. So certainly we're gonna see something interesting. And you know, like I really want to emphasize that this debate is gonna be profoundly affected by what we saw the last debate and by the fact that Donald Trump is sick. Tommy, I've seen quite a few, and I feel like this was one of the more aggressive ones. Maybe not, maybe I'm too young, right? Because I didn't see any of the ones, you know, way beforehand, before I was born or even after I was born. Also, it's important to note that I don't think it'll matter much, but Kamala Harris, 55-year-old woman, would be the first vice president woman in the history of the United States. So you might see that playing a little bit, you know, into play. You might see that having a consequence in the way that the debate goes. But, you know, I'll be watching that in the Hiram fam, in the watch party. We can talk about it as it unfolds. Last year, 33 million watched the vice presidential debate. This year, we're expecting to see more. I mean, usually the vice president debates only get the attention of about half the viewers of the presidential debate. And for those of you that don't know where we're at, we are here in Austin, Texas, watching the bats leave their cave under Congress Bridge, again, downtown Austin, Texas, as we prepare to watch tonight's ever more important presidential debate, vice presidential debate. What kind of things do you guys expect? I was completely wrong about the presidential debate last time, sadly. I really was really wrong about the last presidential debate. I expected to see a little bit different, you know, dynamics. I thought that on the issue of race, Donald Trump and Joe Biden would see more eye to eye, and they kind of did, you know, in that both of them advocated for more peaceful protests. But, you know, there was a lot of questions about Donald Trump's approach to some of the groups like the Proud Boys, which he later denounced. He denounced white supremacy, something he didn't explicitly do at the debate. I feel like he might have meant to, I'm not sure, but definitely did not do it when he had the opportunity on the debate stage. So that might be something that Kamala Harris uses, you know, against Mike Pence. And some of the other, you know, standout moments, again, Kamala Harris might talk about Donald Trump's behavior and his willingness not to follow the rules. But it's going to be really hard to do that because Mike Pence is really well mannered. He's really soft-spoken. He's never been like as erratic, as eccentric, as you know, loud, and as I don't know, whatever you want to call it, as at least Donald Trump has been in the past. But hopefully we see some of, we're likely to see some echoing thoughts, you know. Usually vice presidents are there to, you know, these vice presidential debates like in 2016 serve to help bring more points and more arguments in favor of the presidential candidates. You know, so again, and what a lot of people don't realize, or maybe people do subconsciously realize, is that the vice presidents don't have the amount of power that, for example, the presidents have, or hardly any power at all. So that's why you don't get as many viewers for these vice presidential debates. But beyond that, honestly, unlike the presidential debate, I don't want to try to make predictions, but more like, you know, hold on to my pants and see what we can expect. I don't think it'll be as erratic or as crazy as what we saw, you know, again with the presidential debate. So Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that the Vice President Mike Pence was kind of at first outspoken about the plexiglass that they were going to implement to keep the presidential candidates better protected from COVID. He did not want the plexiglass. I think it's still going to happen, but you know, now we have a lot of White House officials who are very sick, or not very sick, but who are sick with coronavirus. A lot of individuals like Donald Trump, who at first were a little more adamant about not having as much protection, now seeing themselves kind of, you know, not forced to, but pushed to be a little more safe than usual. But even then, Mike Pence pushed back, so I don't know what that's gonna bring in terms of conversation. I'm sure that Kamala Harris will try to weaponize Mike Pence's resistance to the plexiglass during the debate. But again, I try to make these predictions the first presidential debate, and I did a terrible job, honestly. Just goes to show you, I think it's really important, like, you know, time where you can't really predict or say what's gonna happen, you know, in these debates. You can't really, you can try to get ahead of the, you know, curve by looking at the policies beforehand like I have, but in terms of behavior, the emotion, the feeling that it essentially gets you know, projected in these moments, that you know, I think influences so much of what we see, and it's almost the one thing that we really can't be incredibly predictable or can predict. We can't be prophets about it. So yeah, if you guys want to watch that vice presidential debate with us in the Hiram fam, you know, you can. There will be another watch party as well in the Truth, Honor, and Respect group. We will be there discussing what's happening as it's happening. I find it incredibly important and fun to you know, be able to talk with you guys about what's happening before our eyes as it's unfolding. It's always great to have the opportunity to discuss some of these really important topics. I mean, from, you know, racial inequality to the coronavirus, to healthcare, to, I mean, the list is endless. And every single issue today feels more important than ever because of the division and how much these two presidential candidates disagree on the issues. I mean, it's almost like we're dealing with polar opposites. There's division in America like never before, and it certainly will be reflected tonight, especially because, you know, these vice presidential debates usually aren't as important, but I expect that this one, historically, is going to be one of the more important debates, you know, between vice presidents. You know, vice presidents usually don't get a lot of attention. Usually historians don't really think that these presidential debates are consequential. Do you think it's going to be consequential? I mean, we don't know. And I hope you guys enjoy my political commentary, sort of, I guess, my coverage, you know, trying to summarize a little bit about what we can expect. Some questions that I would, you know, think about going into this particular debate is, one, how does Trump's diagnosis of COVID affect the way that, you know, people perceive his response to COVID? How does Kamala Harris, being the first potential woman vice president, you know, how does that, you know, have consequences in the way that people view this debate? The next one is, you know, how does a pandemic in general affect the way that these candidates are perceived? Another question to think about is, you know, how, you know, important is this election compared to other elections, and do we see that reflected in the presidential debates? And how do we see it reflected? Do we see more rational debate? Do we see more emotional debate? You know, are we likely to see more emotional debate even between two very, you know, not soft-spoken? Kamala Harris is not as soft-spoken. Again, she was one of the biggest interrogators in Congress, but Mike Pence is definitely a lot more soft-spoken. So are we going to see them be emotional now that, you know, a lot of people are on edge about this presidential election? So there's so many questions to consider, guys, and honestly not enough headspace. You know, gun ownership, another big issue, you know, especially nowadays, that we're seeing a lot of shootings, you know, not only from, you know, one particular group, but from various groups who, you know, have claimed self-defense in every one of these situations. You know, I don't think either of the candidates is for necessarily banning all weapons. Most of them take a more moderate approach of a little bit more regulation. You know, we'll see. I don't know if even gun rights are a big conversation, you know, given the whole coronavirus thing right now. So much to think about, guys. So many questions, but I would ask these questions to yourself as you watch this debate. I'm going to ask myself these questions as I watch this debate. I am 23, you know, and still learning about the development of what the future holds for our country. And I hope that I can understand it more, reading your comments, watching these debates, you know, and reading as much information as I can about the different policies from as many sources as I can. It's exhausting, but nonetheless necessary. So, thank you guys so much for joining me on this really quick, brief, but very important, you know, kind of pre-game, I'd say, pre-analysis of what is important in this next debate today. Last time, again, 2016, we had 33 million viewers for this vice presidential debate, half of what, you know, we see at presidential debates. Will this year be different? Are more people interested? Are more people going to be engaged? Do most people feel like the stakes are higher? So I know right now we're running a poll trying to see if this debate matters. Do you think this debate matters? Are you ready for what tonight's debate can bring, or what it might not bring? Does this matter to you more than other years? Let me know in the comments if this debate is more important to you than the debates in previous years, specifically vice presidential debates, because most people don't find them important. Yeah, that's true. One thing I'll say is that I doubt that this vice presidential debate will change any minds. You know, like we saw the last debate, one thing I predicted correctly was the fact that we're likely to see no change in minds, and the, you know, the candidates more willing to pander to people that already agree with them and speak to the audience more than they speak to themselves. Joe Biden definitely spend the majority of his time speaking to the audience versus speaking to Trump. You know, and again, that doesn't change as many minds. These presidential debates don't usually end or result in huge changes in turnout, but, you know, with the pandemic, with, you know, everything we've been experiencing in the year 2020, we just don't know. The BLM protests across the country, you know, the different shootings that we've seen between protesters and people on the other side. I mean, there's just so much building up to this election. We're about a month away, less than a month away from the elections, and it might be even months before we know the results, because they are being turned in through the mail ballot system, which is unique to this particular election as well. So many new factors in this election that we haven't seen before to consider, which can make this presidential debate more consequential than before. They're usually not, but they might be this time. So, thank you guys. Have a beautiful day. Take care of yourselves, take care of your families. Join the Hiram Fam Watch Party if you want to have discussions with other people, willing to have discussions without a particular bias, without a, you know, a particular bias, the page itself without a particular bias towards one side or the other. It's free, open, and civil conversation. Most live streams are full of spam, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So don't spam, but you can watch with us in the truth, honor, page or in the Hiram fan page. So thank you so much, guys. I love you all. Take care. Peace.